If you kept interrupting me during the course of this conversation, which you have, and I perceive that to be motivated by the fact that you're from a Muslim background and I'm from a Jewish background, would that make that hate speech?
No.
My self-perception is that.
No, it's just that you're really slow at talking and my brain's already finished your sentence
But
for
my
you.
perception isn't that. You walked out of the room, and when you walk out of here, I'm going to turn to these guys and say, well, that was a lot of hate speech, wasn't
That's
it?
fine. You can say that that's hate
And then you
speech.
can be
It's
prosecuted.
absolutely fine for you to say that's hate speech if you want.
And then you can be prosecuted.
If me interrupting you is hate speech, and that's your definition of it, I tell you what, you are being disrespectful to the people who do receive hate speech. The
Like me.
enormous number of people who receive hate speech, real, clear,
So do I.
undeniable hate speech.
So do I.
And your sophistry right now is both transparent
It's
and
not.
deeply disrespectful. And I warn you that most of your listeners will think to themselves, actually, Constantine's being a bit of a dickhead right now.
That's interesting that you say that, because what I'm doing is I'm stress testing your argument. And the point I'm making to you is a person's self-perception can be manipulated. People can lie about how they perceive their the things that they experience. And sometimes people will use the law against other people when it's badly written. Don't you think that's true?
I do think it's true.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm not really being a dickhead. I'm stress testing your argument. And calling me a dickhead might be considered hate speech.
No, it's not hate speech. It's just good observation.
Fine.
Do we create laws based on our subjective feelings or objective fact? How do we create a healthy society? Do we focus on what is outside of us, or do we focus on what is inside of us? I'm going to let Dr. Andrew Huberman have the next say in this, because he's got an interesting perspective that I'll lead our discussion, so to speak. And here he is.
What we need to do is start to figure out how we can, I think, especially for the next generation of kids, how to teach them to regulate their nervous system so that they recognize that pulse of adrenaline as placing them in a compromised position. Like, we have to leverage the idea that being able to hear and listen hinges on the ability to be calm. So therefore, the ability to be calm is crucial to hearing and listening is crucial to our advancement as individuals and as groups. The problem is everyone's been trying to do this backwards. They've said we all have to get along. We have to cancel culture. We all have to, listen to one another. And I think, again, we have to start from the inside. We have to teach it physiologically. Now, I don't have a master plan on how to do that, but one of the reasons I'm here and one of the reasons I'm, teaching neuroscience on Instagram and not just in my laboratory is until we can learn to regulate the self, I don't think we're going to get where we want to go as a culture. But we need.
And I love what he just said. Until we learn to regulate the self, we're never going to get anywhere as a culture. I'm Carrie Blazer, the Divine Feminine. My soul's name is Sophia. And I'm here mainly to share my free ebook linked below with my 6 Divine Feminine self-love strategies. One being, changing the world is an inside job. Okay, this is a complex debate that I go through daily in my head. How do we help the world get from where we are now with extreme levels of mental illness to a world where civil discourse and disagreement civilly is understood to be normal and healthy, where people learn to make logical arguments instead of using ad hominem attacks like dickhead? I love Constantine, and Constantine stays cool, calm, collected. He's Russian. He's Jewish. He's been around the world. He understands challenge. He understands being the underdog. He understands. So I'm in alignment with him. I'm in alignment with Dr. Andrew Huberman. And I'm going to give us one more short before we do a deep dive into what's really going on here from a mental health perspective, from a how do we change the world from our insides, like Dr. Andrew Huberman is talking about, so we can create a world where people can tolerate dissenting opinions. Because in Britain, in Europe, people are, and it's happened in America too, people are getting arrested and getting in legal trouble and getting fired for saying what a biological man is and a biological woman is. Now that has since slowed down the past couple of years. It's now early 2026. But the inability to say that a biological man has XY chromosomes and a biological woman is XX, and that a man can't become a woman, that was illegal somehow in society, supported by law enforcement. I saw a professor that did work on that her whole life, and then when the trans thing came up, she said it and then got fired. And what I've also learned, that when something is true, it's true in multiple places. So when we go into my 6 divine feminine self-love strategies, I'll use psychology, neuroscience, laws of physics, cardiology to show that the universe is a mirror. We live in a holographic universe. The heart is a vortex, projecting how we feel about ourselves outward so that we can see and understand ourselves for self-improvement opportunities. And we'll get a deep dive of that. But let's get into Michael Knowles, and then we'll go into a clip from a congressional hearing so we can see how pervasive this idea is, and it's being taught in institutions, and lawyers are arguing to change law in America so that subjective reality is what's legally enforced as opposed to objective reality. And let's see how that plays out for us.
When this liberal snowflake claimed that speech is violence, Michael Knowles made her regret her words instantly.
Hello. You cited a list of statistics in your talk, which you claim support the idea that illegal immigrants are dangerous or criminals.
I cited a number of statistics that show that they commit federal crimes at a significantly higher rate than native-born Americans. Yeah.
Okay. So what role do you think that structural racism and inherent bias has to play in those statistics?
I don't think that the people who enter this country illegally are forced to do so by some sort of systemic racism. There's no systemic American racist going down to El Salvador and saying, you better get up and sneak into the United States. And there's nobody in the United States who forces people who come here illegally to commit crimes.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the fact that I'm faculty here. I also support protester in the back.
What do you support specifically? Do you think that anti-immigrant rhetoric is violent free speech?
Yes, because of the reasons
you think that
I'm
speech
talking
is
about.
violence?
No, I think that
that's what that sign says.
The conversation that you're having is oppressive, and
so I am oppressing people by what I'm doing. So I am exerting violence on people by my speech. That means that you, a faculty member at an American public university, paid for by taxpayer dollars, are conflating speech with violence.
Yes, speech can be violent. What you are saying contributes to systemic racism in this country. It means that my students of color are pulled over and accused of stealing a car when they did not.
I'm not pulling anybody over for stealing any cars. I see many people of many different races in this room. They all seem to be doing just fine. I don't think any of them have felt violence because they listened to a lecture on basic facts about our immigration system.
Are you there to ask us if we felt violence, or are you just assuming that we haven't?
No, I haven't asked because no violence has been committed on you. Because violence is not a subjective feeling. Violence is an objective fact.
I agree with Michael Knowles. If I shoot someone, that's objective and everyone can see that I shot someone and the impact is such. But if I call 10 people stupid, 10 people will react differently. Why is that? Well, how can we, how can the federal government legally enforce something when our subjective realities have everything to do with how we feel about ourselves? What's inside me is different than what's inside him emotionally, and what's inside her, the last speaker, emotionally. So how do we create a healthy society? And we're going to get into the science that we live in a holographic universe, that the universe is a projection. and I'll use neuroscience, I'll use psychology, use laws of physics, cardiology, because when something is true, it's true in multiple places. So we know it's true. Not, oh, well, that one person fell. Okay, but that person has trauma. And so she's triggered. And now she's blaming other people for her trauma. So now I'm going to bring up a Carl Jung quote, because I just love Carl Jung from my book. And it discusses projection. And it brings up a very triggering figure, Andrew Tate. And so let's get into that. Let me share my presentation here. Here it is. Okay. So my book, which is linked below, My Inner Heroine, Exploring Feminine Pain, explores how I went from a suicide attempt to bringing out healing, loving myself, bringing out my shamanic gifts, and experiencing enlightenment in a span of 5 years, from 2019 to 2024. And I attracted several men into my life to mirror my wounds back to me. You know, if I'm flirting with a guy at yoga, if he's not asking me out, then I got some work to do. Okay. Because if he's repeatedly flirting with me, but I'm not getting a date, maybe there's a problem. So Justin Waller was the second man I attracted into my life, and he's Andrew Tate's best friend. We were DMing on Instagram. I didn't go on a date with any of these guys, but all of these men mirrored my wounds back to me for self-improvement opportunities. The universe is a mirror, showing me myself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. So if I'm attracting, hateful content in my social media, that is that content showing me myself for self-improvement opportunities. Okay, let's go over this Carl Jung quote about projection, because a lot of people project onto Andrew Tate. He's the problem. He's evil. He's this. He's that. A lot of men at the top are like Andrew Tate, and I'm proof of it. You know who I attracted into my life after Justin Waller? 2 decorated Fire Academy instructors in Southern California, where I live. All led me back to my guy from my childhood, who's former special agent in charge of the FBI, currently head of global security GoDaddy, Jason Colvin. All of them. Multiple women. I have a history of rape from my childhood. You can look at my website, carrieblazer.com. I put these men in a lineup with Andrew Tate. Is that hate speech? Okay, let's look at projection, and then we'll keep going. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all of his projections, then you might get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. Our shadow being our subconscious, where our emotional wounds lie. Like I had a wound that I'm replaceable. Well, if I'm replaceable, there's the multiple women, right? But if I didn't attract the players into my life, how would I have found the wound that I'm replaceable? How would my soul show me that wound? Such a man has saddled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself. He is now unable to say, they do this or that. They are wrong and they must be fought against. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong with the world is inside himself. And if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world. He has succeeded in shouldering at least an infinitesimal part of the gigantic, unsolved social problems of our day. And so, yes, Andrew Tate gets projected on a lot. And I'm going to pull up a clip from Congress and Senator Kennedy interviewing Professor, I think Frank, we'll have her name, from George Washington University. And she teaches law, First Amendment law, Second Amendment law, and she has some really interesting things to say. But if we understand that we live in a holographic universe, that our soul, we have an energy body proven by the laws of physics, a soul that comes out through our heart, which is a vortex, and it's projected externally so that we can see who we resonate with. When part of my energy moves, that moves other people's, same frequency, and like, oh, that's my tribe. That's who I resonate with. That's who's a vibrational match. And then we identify with them. Doesn't make that correct. It makes it so you can see yourself. I used to identify as super liberal before I healed. 2024 is the first time I voted Republican for Trump. Very hard for me because I perceived him as a rapist. But, oh, I have a rape wound. My older daughter got super caught up in all the immigration stuff last year, but they're tearing the mother away from the child, and what's the daughter going to do? Oh, let's remember, sweetheart, that when you were 5 weeks old, I got bacterial pneumonia and was put in ICU on a ventilator for 2 weeks. I almost died. Separation of mother and daughter. And she still gets super triggered by it because she still hasn't fully processed that wound. But triggers are our healing friend, not our healing foe. Because when I'm triggered, my emotional pain is at the surface, and it's a perfect time for me to self-reflect. Carl Jung also says this. What irritates you about others leads you to an understanding of yourself. So is Michael Knowles responsible for the emotions of that protester? Did you assume that I was hurt, or did you ask if I was hurt? Well, I wouldn't get hurt by his speech, but she would. So how can Michael Knowles be responsible for the emotions of different people when all the emotions are different? Why isn't she responsible for regulating herself enough so that when she her emotions in her soul, her nervous system well enough that when she goes out into public to have, civil discourse, that she's able to have an adult conversation and she can leave her emotions out of it? Why is Michael Knowles responsible for her internal emotions? And how is that even possible that he could resolve those issues for her? So if he can't be responsible for it, if he can't resolve the problem, how can he be responsible for it? And how do we resolve this problem of other people being responsibility for our emotions when they have no control over our emotions? I'm the only one that has sovereignty over my own soul, and my soul communicates via emotions. So how can someone outside of me have sovereignty over me? Oh, there's a wound in our subconscious, an external locus of control. When we have an external locus of control as our generalized worldview, whether we're cognizant of it or not, that sets us up to make other people responsible for our internal reality. But there's the mental illness, because then you stay stuck. Well, he did it, and he did it, and he did it. That's the problem, Mom. The immigrants. I'm upset about the immigrants. Well, there's no self-reflection. There's no understanding about how reality operates. When something is true, it's true in multiple places. I can see someone get shot in the head and die. The doctor can come along and can confirm death. Someone else can see the brain splattered on the sidewalk. When something's true, it's true in multiple places. But that person at the Michael Knowles, when he was giving his speech, she was the only one upset like that. And validated by a professor who's only asking questions about systemic racism because she's been taught that there's an external locus of control. She's not teaching her students to have sovereignty over themselves. She's teaching them to blame other people for their problems, which keeps them stuck, keeps them yelling and screaming, which we see the protesters doing time and time again. So let's get to this interview. I love him. I love him. And, he says things that are irreverent and inappropriate, but, I do too. So let's get to Senator Kennedy and his interesting interview here. Where is it? Okay, here we go.
Professor Franks, let me ask you, I listened to your and Ms. Hemingway's testimony and Professor Turley's, so I got part of it. As I understand it, your position, Professor Franks, is that I think you used the word myth. It is a myth that the Biden administration used government to compel speech, private speech, but that the Trump administration is doing that. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you think perhaps you're allowing your personal political beliefs to affect your objectivity here?
No, I do not. What is guiding my answers here is that I'm looking to see what the Supreme Court has said. You notice that in the testimony about the censorship
Okay.
industrial
I
complex.
got that part.
No, I just
got
want
that
to
part.
clarify.
No, but I've only got 5 minutes. Your answer is no, as I appreciate it. Let me ask you a couple questions. You wrote a law review article in December of 2023 for the New York University Law Review, and it was about the two cases, Bruin, Supreme Court case, and Dobbs. Remember that article?
Yes, I do.
Okay. In this article, you said, I'm going to quote your words. Taken together, these two cases demonstrate that the Supreme Court has embraced the use of the Constitution as a tool of racial patriarchy, end quote. Did you say that?
Yes.
Okay. And then you went on to say, quote, when the Supreme Court declares that there is a constitutional right to armed self-defense in public, it openly embraces and promotes a culture that privileges white men's ability to terrorize and kill those that they perceive as threats, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
I believe so. Thank you for reading.
Okay. And did you also say in that article, I'm going to quote again, quote, by simultaneously expanding white men's right to kill and constricting women's right not to die, this Supreme Court, referring to the current United States Supreme Court, has turned the Constitution into a homicide pact as well, close quote. Did you write that?
That sounds like me.
Okay. In November of 2024, you tweet, don't you?
I'm not sure what the current terminology is for it, but yes, I am sometimes on the social platform that was formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, you're on a lot, aren't you?
I'm not sure what the relevance of that is.
You're trying to be provocative on there, don't you?
Again, I'm not sure what the relevance.
Well,
of this question
let me
is.
show you the relevance. On November 7th, 2024, from your tweet, here's one of your tweets at 2:41 p.m. Quote, the majority of Americans hate women.
The majority of Americans hate women. That came out of her vortex, from her soul, and it's a projection onto society. So, who hates women? Who hates femininity? She's a law professor. That's a very masculine job. And she wants to change the Constitution. She's attracted to changing gun rights. I mean, the reason we have the Second Amendment, I'm sure it's multiple, but here are the two main reasons. Yes, so people can protect themselves, but also that's the reason no one invades us. The reason that narco-terrorists are coming in with narcotics and not guns is because Americans will all shoot them. And in Europe, they're not allowed. I mean, free speech doesn't exist in Europe, and it's been a challenge. It's one of the reasons we came here, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. We created America based on that. And then number two, it's because in Europe, you can't own a gun. So who is the one that owns guns is the government. So we came here and started this country. But she's saying the majority of Americans hate. And so she's going up against the two main tenets of why we founded America. And now we've tasked her to be a law professor. And we wonder, does she hate her femininity? Because I have a master's degree in East Asian religious studies. And the master's degree I did was all about Taoist perceptions of purity, how Taoism and Buddhism were treating women improperly. The universe is a mirror. So that mirrored my own self-hate back to me by what I was attracted to study and write about. But let's keep listening.
The majority of Americans hate women more than they love anything, including democracy, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
I am not sure what this has to do with the subject matter of this.
Did you
hearing.
say it?
I do not have those words in front of me. I probably said something along those lines, but
Yeah,
what is
you
the
said it.
relevance of
Here
that
it
to
is,
this
big as
hearing?
Dallas, right there.
Yes.
But your political beliefs don't impact your feelings about President Biden or President Trump.
I don't have feelings about either of them. What I have
Sounds
is
to me like you have your favorite feeling is anger. Let me ask you this. You issued another tweet. This was in May of 2022. You've just been tweeting up a storm. You said, quote, "There's a reason why the conservative-dominated Supreme Court thinks the Constitution does not contain a right to an abortion, but is convinced that it contains an individual right to possess firearms. And that reason is white male supremacy," close quote. Did I read that correctly?
Is there a question in this?
Did I read that correctly? That's
there
my
a
question.
I'd like to know the critical analysis techniques that she uses to be so emotionally driven in her so-called objective arguments. Calling out white man, that's coming out of her heart. It's a vortex. We live in a holographic universe. The universe is a mirror. We attract what we are so we can see ourselves. Rumi said, the mystic, what you seek seeks you. And these are the women teaching our universities, and we wonder why our children are incapable of independent thought. Sounds like indoctrination to me. They're the problem. You're a victim, so let's fight the problem. With no recognition about how reality is created. But that's why I'm here. My 6 Divine Feminine Self-Love Strategies free ebook, link below. Please check it out.
That is relevant to this hearing.
Did I read that correctly? Do you really think that the United States Supreme Court, you're an officer of the court, is guided by white male supremacy?
I believe that the First Amendment prohibits the president and other state officials for punishing people for
Did you honestly say that, Professor? And you expect us,
that the First
as a
Amendment,
Democratic witness, to take you seriously? Are you kidding me?
I believe that you should take
You
the First
heard of
Amendment
curb your
seriously, sir.
enthusiasm? Here's my saying, curb my nausea.
This exchange
Okay.
laid
I'm going to stop there. And now let's focus on what is the solution to this challenge. And I'm first going to show how our emotions operate, how, based on the laws of physics, the universe is a mirror. And then we're going to have 2 videos about how the heart is a vortex and how blood flows in an embryo before the heart is even formed. And we're going to rely on Albert Einstein quote and a Nikola Tesla quote. Einstein said, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The field, meaning the energy body of the soul, the particle meaning the body. And that's at the field of epigenetics, epi meaning before, genetics meaning like the body, grounds that Einstein quote in tons of truth and scientific evidence. Additionally, Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So let me pull up my presentation again, and I have to back up to another page in the presentation to show you epigenetics, how this works. And here we are. It's presenting. Great. So let's start on the left with the map of consciousness. And here are all of our emotions. And our souls express ourselves via emotions. And women are the emotional center. Okay. And so that's where the subjective really comes from. Women are designed to express our emotions, surrender to our emotions, and then men are designed to act based on those emotions. Women drop the handkerchief, men decide what to do. The feminine expresses the emotion. We're neurologically designed to make all these emotional connections. So when women process through information, we have to make all these connections through neurological scans. Men don't. That's why neurologically it's supported that men can make quick decisions because they can skip all those connections and live in logic. and ground in reality, where women physiologically, neurologically are not designed for it, whether we like it or not. I mean, it is what it is, right? Like, I can't change it. I had to accept that when I hated my femininity, I was really unhealthy and destroyed all my relationships. So that's not good. But now that I accept that I'm the creative source, I express my emotions, and then the masculine acts based on those emotions, and I stay in my healthy lane. Now I don't have anxiety, I don't have depression, I haven't gotten sick in 6 years. Like, I'm a healthy feminine woman now. But when I deny that I'm a woman, like I did throughout most of my life because of my childhood trauma, pushed me into my masculine, protecting myself, fending for myself, providing for myself, then I was not a healthy person. And I'm a woman, I'm not a man. We can't conflate the two. So this shows us that shame resonates at 20 hertz, where enlightenment is 700 to 1,000 hertz. And the first time I experienced enlightenment was 2 years ago for 3 days. As women, we stay in our emotions longer based on our physiology and how long our hormones kind of stay in that elevated state. It's all designed for a reason. But I was in that elevated state of enlightenment for 3 days, and I was in perfect shape, hot yoga 6 days a week, like 20 pounds lighter than I am right now. I lost 12 pounds. That's how transformative it is. But the highest vibrating energy is the most transformative. And so when I spend more time in this higher vibrating energy, because I've learned to surf the waves of life, I learned to go into my emotional pain, find the wisdom in my shadow or my subconscious and my wound, like the replaceable wound that I had. Then I pull out that wisdom and knowledge and climb my next mountaintop. Then there's the action, the masculine. But when we deny that we have a soul, that our soul communicates via emotions, that that reality is subjective. How I perceive reality to be and what I think is right and wrong is subjective. Now, sure, there's objective truth. There's a tree outside. There's a house outside. There's the federal government. But how I perceive it, good, bad, that's all subjective. And we get into legislating the subjective. Well, that's just an endless rabbit hole. And that's what we've gotten into, is legislating the subjective. And, but I'm not going to get to a deep dive of that now. Let's get back to one more thing about learning to surf the waves of life. The cancer, viruses, bacteria, they all resonate at 100 hertz or below, like fear, grief, anxiety, guilt. So that's when you get sick. But that's also, your body is a mirror to your soul. So if you have a lot of wounds in your soul, a lot of fear, shame, and guilt in your soul, that's what comes out of you. That's what informs your body. When I have fear coming out of my heart constantly, I have an overdose of cortisol in my body. And then the cortisol elevates my sugar levels, and I crave sugar constantly because I'm constantly in fight or flight, and that immediate sugar fuels that. Fight or flight is not designed. We're not designed to live there for 35 years like I did. That's not how we're physiologically designed. That destroys the body. We're designed to go into fight or flight in a real need, like, a lion is chasing me, or a man's with a gun, run, quick, and then you hide and you're fine and you let go of the fight or flight. But because I didn't know how to process my emotional wounds and my traumas, I stayed in them. I stayed stuck. And I blamed everybody else for it because I did not understand that we live in a holographic universe, that the universe is a mirror showing me myself every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. So what I'm attracted to, like in this woman's case, like white supremacy and, most Americans hate women, that's a mirror, girlfriend. That's her perception. I used to have a fear of men. So when I was in public, I was constantly, anxious. And I blamed that on everybody else. But when I found that wound inside of me, and I turned it into wisdom that men protect me, and I went to see my older daughter, the same one I talked about, immigration. She used to have a jewelry business, so she did markets every weekend, and I was there with her every weekend at all these very public markets. So she was very aware from her whole life how much anxiety mom has in public. I showed up, she's like, Mom, what's different? What'd you do? What happened? You're better. What's going on? She knew instantly. that I was better. I'm like, oh, I told her, I found that I fear all men and I turned it into wisdom and I'm just so much better. I walked around, da-da-da. You know, we live on the beach in Southern California. I could enjoy being on the beach in Southern California and not constantly on guard. I was on guard because my internal state was on guard, and I was projecting that externally and perceiving as though I needed to be on guard when it wasn't true. It wasn't true. So how does this work in terms of our souls? And we're going to watch this physics experiment here in a second. But when my soul, let's say I have part of my soul has selfishness and it vibrates at 40 hertz. When my 40 hertz moves, the people around me who also have the same 40 hertz will also move, showing me my tribe, showing me myself. So if you're attracted to a lot of people who say most Americans hate women, that's an internal reality your soul is showing you, that you hate women. And when we speak for everyone, that's triangulation. That's psychological bullying. Most people. Show me the evidence for that. I mean, you're at Georgetown getting a law professor. Where's your evidence of that? That's a subjective truth. Because most, people, I would say most women probably hate themselves based on the current society that we force them into being men. Because most women want to stay home with their kids, like me. But let's watch this physics experiment and see how this works, because they're going to show us two tuning forks. When one tuning fork is calibrated for 512 hertz and one is 440, there's no movement, there's no resonance. Can't see yourself. When there's 440 and 440, sorry, I have nerve damage in my nose, and it irritates me when I talk. So when both tuning forks are tuned to the same frequency, then they move each other. So let's see that work. Let's see that in action. And there's the movement. Clear as day. We're here as souls having a human experience to see ourselves, not to take our crap out on other people. Of course, we've all done it and, probably do it again. But we're here to see and improve ourselves. So let's get into the cardiology. And these two videos, they're my favorite. They are my favorite. And I'm just going to bring them up and let them speak for themselves. And then it'll really clearly define, why changing the world is an inside job. Cancel culture doesn't change how we feel about ourselves. And how we feel about ourselves is projected externally so that we can see ourselves. So when everyone learns to love themselves, self-love creates heaven on earth. When we all love ourselves and we're all projecting love from the vortex of our heart, and then that's mirrored back to us, we're encouraging love. And the most transformative energy is enlightenment. And I'll get into changing the world as an inside job after this, because I'll show you another physics experiment that really clearly illustrates how when you spend time with someone who experiences enlightenment all the time, then you will naturally also learn to process your emotions, and that will help you energetically also expand your emotional range. Because when you want to align with the highest vibrating energy, and if you have to let go of fear, guilt, and shame to do it, that's the triggering process. That's the triggering process. It triggers emotional pain to the surface so it could be transformed, and then you vibrate higher. Then you're more in alignment with that higher vibrating energy. Triggers are your healing friend, not your healing foe.
Let me just read this, because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe. Because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions. But it is false. It has always been false. And the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refused to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance. The blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough. The pump is strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That
That's an
lie was dead on
external locus of control. This is what happens when we use a worldview to understand science. Like we saw that professor. Well, what's systemic racism? That's the only lens that she's been taught to look through, so she can't get at what reality is really going on. So when we looked at, well, how does the heart push the blood? That's the wrong question. When we don't ask the right questions, we don't get at what's really going on. Now, I understand that 400 years ago, we didn't understand physics like the way we do, but he's going to say in a second, we've understood this for 40 years, the Heart Math Institute, but we're not teaching it to kids. It goes against the Christian worldview, external locus of control. So people will fight against it subconsciously. That's a wound. When we have an external locus of control, that's the victim mindset. That sets up for codependency. You're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem. That's not acknowledging that we live in a holographic universe. You know, early Christians, I'm the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. So I focus on Christianity. Early Christians were focused on inner authority. But in the 4th century, when they created the Christian church, there was the rise of the nation state. So they deleted 17 of the Gospels, kept 4, and used those 4 to create a church that supported the rise of a masculine-led nation state. Inner authority, female inner authority, was in direct contradiction to that. So suppress the feminine, institutionalize the feminine in compassion, nurturing, forgiveness from a male God. Forgiveness is feminine. Oh, and women can't talk. Communication is feminine. So what happens when we repress the feminine? Were there a lot of wars? Did the Christian church kill a lot of people during the Spanish Inquisition, during the Crusades, while burning people at the stake, manifest destiny? Lacking wisdom, femininity. Because I've noticed that my definition of a patriarchy is what happens at a Boy Scout camporee without women. That's when the fingers get blown off. That's when the fires get out of control, when they lack a spark of wisdom. It's all external control on the physical, on nature, on people, on animals. Mother Earth, femininity, wisdom. I mean, Christianity justified manifest destiny by God gives us dominion over animals and land. Oh, did we destroy our ecological systems by killing all the buffalo, the beavers, the wolves, the otters, the salmon, which are all keystone species that contribute to stopping flooding, drought, wildfires, and stabilize the land? Did we create our own problem? Do we live in a holographic universe showing us ourselves in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement? Yes, we do.
Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge. The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you. It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it. It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know
Yes,
the
the
heart has
neurological
more
structure of the
neuronal
heart
cells than
is
parts
far
of the
more
brain.
complex than the brain, and the heart sends far more signals to the brain than the other way around, inner authority of the soul. So our physiology supports inner authority. When something's true, it's true in multiple places. That only I have sovereignty over my own soul. And the constitution of my soul, my emotions, if my emotions are typically in fear, guilt, and shame, that's what's going to come out of my heart, and that's what's going to create my reality. So I had a rape wound, a replaceable wound, I'm the problem wound. So was that a positive reality that I was living in? I mean, I had 35 years of debilitating lower back pain, failed relationships left, right, and center. Just saying.
They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system.
Coherence in the heart
So why are
transforms the
they still
entire
teaching
nervous
children?
system. So when emotions like fear, guilt, and shame are coming out of my soul through my heart, that calibrates my nervous system for fear, guilt, and shame. So with a traumatic childhood, like I had, my mom was an alcoholic, my dad was a workaholic. They didn't know how to regulate their emotions. So a lot of fear, guilt, and shame was unconsciously projected at me, and I internalized it because I didn't understand that I am not the problem. I internalized it that I am the problem, basically rejected my whole heart. Let me show you how I felt. There's a clear picture on my website that shows exactly how I felt. You know, picture speaks 1,000 words, right? This is my origin story. If you want to check out the signs and synchronicities I have on here about how I figured out in reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. There I was at 5. Yeah, I was cute. Okay. Oh, I got to share my screen. You're not even seeing my screen. You can't see that I was cute. You got to see that I was cute. Okay. Was I cute? I think so. Okay. Here is how I felt most of my life. The universe is a mirror showing me myself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. That picture is of that statue is of a grieving parent. I didn't know that I had forced abortions until the last year and a half, and I'm 55 now. My womb was screaming at me for 35 years from the time I was 15 and a half. But if you want to hear that, read that story. I haven't written a book on it yet. It's on my website, carrieblazer.com. So what kind of reality was I experiencing when that's how I felt about myself? Pretty challenging, right? Pretty challenging. How many women, how many professors, like we just saw those two, have time to process their emotional pain? And do you think that they maybe feel like that internally as unhealthy women? And that's why they project so much hate? They're in anger so much, like Senator Kennedy said? Just consider that. Self-reflection is feminine, and I'm here to teach self-reflection. So that's why I ask a lot of questions and don't necessarily give a lot of answers. I know I give answers, but I also ask a lot of questions so people learn that self-reflection is so important and healthy, and that when we all learn to self-reflect and process our emotional pain, then when we come out in society, I'm not going to be worried whether I agree with someone or I don't. I'm not going to be worried if they hurt my feelings or not, because I'm an emotionally mature adult who takes responsibility for my emotions. It used to be that if you couldn't control yourself in society, everyone encouraged you to go home, get yourself together, and come back and have the conversation. But now it's just supported that yelling and the screaming in the streets at everybody, that's normal and healthy. But it's not. All right, This is how a heart is formed in an embryo, which, I'm a mother, 3 kids, I'm a mom, 3 beautiful children. Let's see how this works. Before the heart beats for the first time, something far greater begins to move. Long before your heart ever beat, thousands of cardiac cells made a silent decision. There was no pulse, no rhythm, no sound. In the earliest stages of development, individual heart cells begin firing electrical signals on their own. Then something remarkable happens. They synchronize. Separate impulses align into one coordinated electrical wave. That wave triggers the first contraction, the first heartbeat, the beginning of a rhythm that can last a lifetime. Look at that. Isn't that incredible? And that's how they come together and form the heart. So first they're apart, and then through energetic resonance, they move together to form the vortex of the heart. Anyway, I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope you check out my free ebook that will be linked below. If you want more from me, then there's a link to my book on Amazon. There's also on my YouTube channel a meditation and shamanic drumming video, my weekly webinar where I go over all my healing techniques, like 6 DIY free healing techniques. We don't need psychology and we don't need religion. Because when we all learn to have sovereignty over our own souls, when we learn that we live in a holographic universe, we can let all that go and understand that when we have a healthy woman as an emotional center in the family, she does all that. She's the emotional center, which is also the spiritual center, because the 5D comes before the 3D, right, in spirituality, because the soul communicates via emotions out through the heart. So I hope you support me in reestablishing a healthy nuclear family. Empower women that being the emotional center is equally important to being the masculine lead, to being like the physical lead in the masculine. Equally important. Let's take women out of the workforce 40 hours a week, where we're physiologically not designed to be, and put them back in the home. Doesn't mean they can't work. You could have chickens in your house, you can have a farm, you can bake. But let's prioritize women and children before wealth and convenience. When we took women out of the home, during the Industrial Revolution, and they made textiles in a factory so they couldn't care for their kids, we destroyed the nuclear family to put money and convenience before health and well-being. Just think about that. All right, take care. Bye.